So there were literally no divas. We had to go in the water, even when it was super cold, and everybody did it. Everybody was fine with it. So yeah, no divas on the set from my experience.
Welcome back to Under Oath. Today we're talking to actress Alexandra Paul. Alex, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are we talking on the West Coast or on the East Coast? Where are we talking from without giving your address?
Oh, I'm in California. I'm in a hotel in California. I just went to the premiere of After Baywatch Moment in the Sun.
How tough is that? You know, watching something that you put a lot of love into and you get to see where everyone is good and bad.
Oh my gosh, everyone is good. Everyone is doing so well. It's wonderful. You know, it's kind of like going to a class reunion. Well, in my class reunion, when I went to my 10-year class reunion, everyone was doing so well. I was so proud of, everyone around me. And it's the same thing with the class of Baywatch. Amazing people through all the 12 seasons.
Now, I guess the tough thing for me is because a lot of times when they do these documentaries, there's sometimes a mean overtone to it. And it's not about the happiness, it's about the gotcha moments. You know, is that what happens here? Or is it more about, hey, listen, we fought through this and now this is where we're at?
When I wouldn't have done the documentary if I thought it was going to be a slam piece, because I don't want to get involved with like mean things and all that. And I only have really positive things to say about the show. My experience for 4.5 seasons on that show was amazing. So the reason that I did it was because Nicole Eggert, who's one of the actresses on the show, called me, and she's a producer, and I trusted her. And the director, he's very open, and he doesn't want to just slam people either. So the documentary is not about that. It's not about, it's not mean. It's true. There's a lot of truth to it and people's truth and their experience. But, the whole show of Baywatch was always a really wonderful set and kind, and people were nice to each other, and there weren't any divas. So, I think the documentary is going to reflect that.
You know, that's amazing to me because normally when you hear about television shows and everything else, there's always one person who was difficult and that person had to get fired or they made everyone else miserable. I mean, who really controlled that from happening?
You know who controlled that from happening? Was David Hasselhoff. And let me tell you why. Because as the lead actor on a series and the most experienced, he was surrounded by a lot of young actors whose first job was this show that had so many eyeballs on it. But David came in on time every day. He knew his lines. He was kind to everybody. He loved his fans. He was inclusive. And that meant that some, young, pretty actor who came in to Baywatch as their first job, if they started acting like a diva, I mean, I think we all would have just looked at them going, what are you doing? So he really set the tone for every day on the set and how people were treated. So there were literally no divas. We had to go in the water, even when it was super cold in California. Believe it or not, yes, it does get cold, and the Pacific Ocean gets cold, and everybody did it. Everybody was fine with it. So yeah, no divas on the set from my experience.
Now, one of the tough things I think, I have a hard time looking at myself for pictures 20, 30 years ago. I'm very critical, and I think that's just a personal thing. How is it when you look at yourself 20, 30 years ago? Are you like going, is it nostalgic? Is it like, I hated having to wear this?
That's a really good question. I appreciate you asking that. Well, in terms of having to wear this, if you're talking about watching ourselves on a series or a movie, on Baywatch, we just wore a bathing suit, so that was the only uniform. So I think yes, there's a slight awkwardness because I feel like even today at 61, I sort of like myself more than I did when I was in my late 20s and early 30s. That's when I was on the show. So yeah, it is kind of weird looking back at yourself and realizing how much you've grown. But then also saying, I'll tell you one thing too, is it's like, I look at myself and I go, why did I why did I worry about my body so much? Why I looked fine. You know what I mean? I don't think I appreciated the benefits of youth also when I was actually that age.
You know, it's scary because I hear stories back then about how cruel people were about weight and physical fitness and everything else like that. And I think we're coming to grips a little bit. I think we're a lot better than we used to be. But, you hear the horror stories about, because I've interviewed people from shows from the 70s and the 80s where they said producers would, say, try to starve them and do these things. I mean, was there any bit of that back then? Or was it like, hey, listen, just do your best?
So it was in our contracts that we couldn't gain or lose more than 5 pounds from when we were hired. And that was instituted for both men and women. And it was because the very first season, there was a guy who was cast, and he was so happy he was cast. He apparently partied his way to an extra 20 pounds when he got on the set. That was the story I heard. So, and so, you know, my body type was very different from the other actors. I was tall and slender and athletic, and my breasts were small and natural. And the producers accepted me completely as I was, and I appreciated that very much. And then in my second or third season, I cut my hair short, and they were very supportive. Now, I do agree with you that if there was a Baywatch reboot, which there's Fox is talking about doing one, that there would be more diversity, because it was a very white show, very white, unfortunately. And there would be much more diversity, and there would in race and also in body type. Because basically we all were low body fat, and then, most of the women were curvaceous, and then there was me, and then the men were muscular. So, but I think today it would be very different, especially with the women's bodies. Some would be slender and some would be rounder, and that's a good thing.
Now, the one thing that always surprised me about this one is the international following, how big it was overseas. That we thought it was good here, but overseas it was crazy.
I know. And by the way, yes, no, here people were like, "You're on Baywatch," and they looked at it with disdain. I mean, truly, I got so much of that, especially here in Hollywood. But overseas, there was unabashed enthusiasm about the show. It was really beautiful. And it was really the people overseas that made the show such a hit, that made it so that there were 1 billion people a week watching Baywatch. And a lot of that, too, is because, America, I think right now, America is not looked upon as favorably overseas as it was. But back in the 90s, America was really held up as a place, a wonderful place to live and grow up. And here they were watching a show that was full of athletic, healthy people running around saving people in the sun on the beach. And it sort of just solidified their idea of what Baywatch was. And it was fun for them to watch. So it was really the international audience that made us such a hit, and made us, we're actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most watched show in the world. And we still are, because right now there's so many platforms that you can watch shows on, that, a successful show gets a third of the audience that a successful show back then did, because there were fewer shows through fewer platforms.
I always think about stuff like this when you talk about going overseas, everything. I'm known, I have a radio show, I do stand up, I have comic books, but people always know me from a trial I did a long time ago, because I'm also a lawyer. For you, when you travel overseas, I mean, you've been in movies with Tom Hanks, Kevin Costner, you've done a lot of work, a lot of activism. And the idea of, I'm going to be known for this for the rest of my life, is that something you love or something you come to grips with? I mean, how do you deal with that?
You know what? I embraced it. Everybody is put in one box or another. And I decided not to fight it and just be appreciative that I have a box that people are talking about. And I'm proud to have been on that show, sort of the little engine that could. I mean, who would have thought that this fluffy television show that had a low budget, and nobody, that was canceled in the first year, which kicked off the NBC network and revived again by the producers. Who would have thought that there would be that it would go on for 12 years, then be a spin-off, then have a movie made about it with The Rock, then be remastered and put on Amazon Prime here for the in the United States for people to watch, and it's the most streamed series now in the world because it's on so many platforms around the world. So it still has its own winning category. I mean, who would now now there's a documentary. I mean, who would have thought, right? So it's kind of a giggle. It's kind of an underdog story.
Now, was the other night the first night you saw it complete?
I have not seen it. I'm
Oh,
going to be watching it when everybody else is. No, I haven't seen it. So we went to the premiere last night, but that was really just for us all to see each other and celebrate it. So truthfully, I haven't seen it, but I am hoping that it is entertaining for people. I know that already there's a lot of interest in it.
now last night, I guess at the premiere, there are obviously certain people you haven't seen for a very long time. Is it, you mentioned like it's a high school reunion. I mean, do you cry? Is it just happiness?
Totally, it was very, very happy. But I had seen pretty much all of them when we celebrated 30 years, which was in 2019. So 5 years ago, I saw pretty much everybody, and then I've kept in touch with many of them. David Chokichi and Jason Simmons are two of the actors on the show with whom I consider my very close friends.
Now, what I love particularly about you is not the professional work you did, but you were a serious activist. You went out, you were activist of the year. I mean, how important is it for you to go out there and support causes and to be there for people?
Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. I appreciate it. I've been an activist since I was 7, and I wrote to President Nixon and asked him to stop pollution. And I'm still an activist now in 2024. I always say that acting made me happy, but activism fed my soul. So it's such an important part of my life to be an activist for causes. I'm mostly focused on animal rights and human population numbers, trying to help us deal with climate change. So those are the two things that I'm focused on now. But I've certainly, yes, activism has been a really important part of my life. But I'm lucky that as an actor, I can be an activist. I can be someone who does peaceful civil disobedience, and it doesn't affect my career because a jail record, which I have for peacefully protesting, doesn't mean much in Hollywood. They're like, "What? You didn't get caught for drunk driving or drugs? You just got caught for telling a police officer that you're protesting for peace." so yeah, I'm lucky to have been in a profession which allowed me to also be the activist that I'm meant to be.
I think one of the hardest thing when you're out as an actor or an actress and you're out there trying to do what you need to do and people are always screaming at you to stay in your lane and they're saying you don't have a right to, let us make our own decisions. You know, with the internet, it's so cruel. I mean, do you just go, hey, listen, it's just part of doing business, or does it affect you sometimes?
I actually don't participate a lot in social media because I'm busy. I'm busy being an activist. I don't, so that's not my thing. So I don't pay attention to people's cruelty. And by the way, I don't force people to do anything. I just, express my feelings, and I want them to express theirs. Activists of any sort, even if I don't agree with their point of view, I admire, because they're standing up for what they believe in, whatever it is. So I'm a big admirer of people expressing themselves. That's how it should be in America.
I think about fame sometimes, and I think about what it gets you, like some of the cool things you're able to do because of it. And one of the questions ask certain people when I get to interview them is, what is the coolest thing you've been able to do based on your fame? Whether that means go to the White House, meet like Robert De Niro. I mean,
Oh,
what are some of the coolest things that you've been able to do because of, the success and fame you've had in the industry?
oh, well, yes. Oh my gosh, I have met President Clinton actually. I went there on behalf of women's rights in the 90s, and that was great. But you know what the highlight was? Is that I've been registering voters since oh my gosh, I registered voters every week for 18 years on street corners in LA. And so I was invited to go to South Africa to register voters before their first free and fair election there in 1994. And so I went and helped because South Africa, of course, they were trying to get a whole new category of people, the Black Africans there, to be able to vote. It was the first time, and there was a lot of course, suspicion, like, is this going to be free and fair? So we brought a congregation of actors over, like Angela Bassett was there, and amazing Danny Glover, and I was able to go, and I had lunch with Nelson Mandela. Isn't that amazing? So that was the highlight of, and I let Angela Bassett sit next to him because, you know, she's Angela Bassett.
Yes.
And I didn't sit right next to him, but I sat one person away and was able to talk to him. He's amazing.
Was that just, I can't even imagine you're sitting there going, this is happening. I mean, how cool a moment is this for you to go, you know, I don't want to say you feel like a poser, but sometimes you just feel so below what you're doing at that period of time that it amazes you.
You know, when you're in Hollywood and you're an activist, back then especially, all the politicians would come to Hollywood for fundraising, and people would come to speak about. So Desmond Tutu came and spoke, and so I have met quite a few people of note. But so I was it wasn't totally different from my life, because being an activist, I met other prominent activists, and but Nelson Mandela, that's the coolest for sure.
You know, a lot of people, when they do their activism, they don't realize how important it is to get to the children. And we have about a little more than 2 minutes left. I know that you did a special show for PBS for kids that dealt with the environment. If you can talk about that just for a second.
Yes. Well, I co-hosted, I hosted and co-produced a couple series. One was called The Cost of Cool. We made it to go into schools, and it talked about how, you know, buying things and stuff affects the environment and doesn't really give you fulfillment. So that was one of them. And the other one was called Jam Packed, on human overpopulation, because the world human population when I was born was 3 billion, and now I'm 61 and it's over 8 billion. And I've always been concerned about that issue. That is probably my number one issue, is to encourage people to choose, no coercion, to have smaller families all around the world. And then we can deal with climate change better and limited resources better, so that everyone on the planet can live a better life.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And also, I realize we have something common, and that is, if I can trust the internet. I was an EMT in the Army a long time ago, and I heard you got EMT certified a long time ago too. So we at least have that in common.
Oh, well, I'm sure we have a lot more in common. But yes, I became a certified EMT in the 80s, before I got Baywatch, because my twin sister was a firefighter, and she said, Alexandra, you know, you really should get certified, because you could save people like Dad if he had a problem or something. And so I got certified, and I kept that certification for 23 years. I never used it, but I was happy to have it.
Well, I can't tell you how much.
Are you still certified?
Yes. It was a little bit ago, but you know, it was the Army and everything else. It's been a great talking to you, and I hope this documentary just does fantastic things and elevates your platform to do more in the world. We need more people out there like you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the excellent questions. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.